and welcome back. Ashley Romano here with BigGirlFitGirl, and today I have my awesome friend Brianna.
Hello.
So I'll give you a little bit of backstory, I guess, but basically what happened was we got together one day to have a little conversation. We did go paddle boarding, but before it started, it was raining, so we were just talking in the car, and we ended up having a 3-hour conversation in the car while waiting to go and paddleboard. So after that conversation, though, I was like, damn, people who could have been a fly on the wall for that conversation, it would have helped so much. So I asked Brianna if she'd be cool with it. And, she's having her own podcast one of these days, so we're just putting that out there, into the universe. But I figured this is a good way to step out of her comfort zone, but also a way that we could, share what it is that we talked about that day with other people. We don't remember exactly what we talked about that day, but, I'm sure it'll kind of come to us. So it all started because we actually met on Instagram, I don't know, a year or two ago?
Yeah, a year and a half, 2 years.
About a year and a half ago or so. Yes, definitely about a year and a half ago, because we met and started chatting a little bit. First of all, we were both on this crazy weight loss journey.
Yes.
We were both vegan, and that's what we had in common. So one day Brianna reached out to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, you seem cool, and you're in South Florida, we should hang out sometime. So we had a beach day one day, and then it was right at the time that I was first starting to really question my life choices, if you will. I was really starting to think of one, I was dieting like crazy, I was being more strict and restrictive than ever, and weight was coming back on, so I was starting to think okay, maybe this isn't something is changing in me biologically that's not allowing this healthy lifestyle to work for me. And by work, for me, I thought work meant weight was coming off. So it wasn't working for me anymore. And I was also starting to question, what are the reasons that I'm continuing with veganism? Because at this point, I'm not curing anything. At this point, it's kind of just a way for me to restrict, really. I was starting to open my eyes to that and think this isn't something I really want to do anymore. I haven't made a video about why I stopped being vegan anymore, so I'm going to stop with that there. Not that we can't talk about that today, but this isn't a why I stopped being vegan video, but it's coming. So we meet at the beach. We're literally splashing around the waves for hours, and we get into conversation, and eventually it comes up I'm not going to be vegan anymore. And she's how far into veganism were you at that time? For how long?
About a year.
Yes.
Yeah,
so she's an enthusiastic vegan, looking for her tribe of other enthusiastic vegans, and I ruin her life, crush her dreams. So we were still friendly and cool and stuff like that, but that was something that we no longer were really gonna connect over. Yeah. And I wasn't girl, you should stop being vegan, but I did just share it's not something that I'm gonna do anymore. I feel I'm doing it for the wrong reasons, and I didn't know if we were still gonna be friends after that.
Well, I think it's interesting to point out my reaction to that, because I was so taken back, like she said, and I was like, oh my gosh, should I be vegan anymore? And I think that's so important, because that reaction is what, in the end, ultimately made me question why I was still a vegan, right? I felt as if you had told me you were leaving, religion of some sort or something. Mm-hmm. It was so dramatic for me to hear that. So, and I looked up to you so much, so I was like, what? But yeah, so it kind of planted some seeds, I think, and made me kind of question my own journey. But yeah.
Yeah. So fast forward, however many months it was after that, and Brianna reaches out to me and says, Ashley, I'm really going through something. I really need to talk. Can we talk? And she was saying, well, I guess inadvertently, this video is kind of about not being vegan anymore, because that's where the conversation branches, but it's such a bigger thing. It's not about hating veganism or talking down on veganism. What it boils down to is using veganism as a crutch for restriction or for disordered eating, which is at the end what we both realized we were doing it for. This was, the animal saving was a bonus. The health benefits were a bonus. But the bigger thing was there were so many things that we could restrict rationally because they weren't vegan. So for example, for me, like if I was at a birthday party and somebody offered a cake or cupcakes or whatever, it was so easy to be like, oh no, I can't have it, it's not vegan. But deep down, I wanted cake so bad, but because it wasn't vegan, I had like a valid excuse to restrict eating cupcakes. And then on my way home, I would like stop and go to Whole Foods and get a 6-pack of vegan cupcakes and eat all 6 of them. Where if I had just had the original cupcake, like I could have just had 1 cupcake.
Yeah. And enjoyed it with her friends and family.
Yeah, instead of eating it in my car.
Yeah.
So it really all tied into like, this is becoming a crutch for disordered eating patterns. And by the way, Bella is here with us today. So she's probably just gonna go back and forth from licking her to licking me to licking her to licking me. But that's how she shows love, okay? All right, so we get in the car and we start talking to each other, and you kind of just started like spilling it to me. So share whatever it is you're comfortable with sharing that, you know, the world is gonna say.
Well, for me, it was like the original conversation, and like you said, you used that example about the cupcake when we were at the beach that day, and I think that like hit home for me. And then I also started seeing a therapist, an eating disorder specialist, who just happens to do eating disorder as well. And she immediately started calling me out on some things about my veganism, and I was like in such denial still at that stage. And then like your little seed you planted, and then her little seeds all of a sudden one day just kind of hit me. Like I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm vegan for all the wrong reasons, and I'm using it as a way to restrict. And that was the first time I think I admitted like that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm restricting with it. And it didn't even click. Like, it wasn't like a conscious thing I think that I was doing. Like, I don't know how you felt.
I feel the same, man.
Like, I feel like my intentions were good, but I didn't realize how it was leading me towards this eating disorder. And so I had like a reality check. So I immediately thought of Ashley, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk to you because you're like the only person who's gonna understand. Also, it can be very overwhelming to feel like you are leaving the vegan world.
Yeah.
And I knew Ashley was already on that out. So I was like, she's the only person who's gonna understand me. So we had that conversation, but I think it was just me coming to her and saying, I totally understand like what you were saying and going through, that, you know, it becomes a restriction. Like there were so many times that I was not eating or restricting food because it wasn't quote unquote vegan. And going without food is not okay just because it's not vegan.
Right.
And I think that I had convinced myself that that was okay. And it was creating this perpetual like binge and restrict cycle in my life. And I didn't recognize it until someone else pointed it out to me. And yeah, it's just, I realized, you know, I, like you said with the cupcake, I was doing the exact same thing. And I felt so much shame and guilt over that, which is another sign of an eating disorder.
Right.
And I realized that like this was something much bigger that I needed to address, not just this vegan lifestyle. So yeah.
So for me, I guess it was when I had started a journey of wanting to learn to eat intuitively. Because like I said, my lifestyle was no longer working meaning I wasn't losing weight anymore, and weight was starting to come back on. What I didn't understand at that time was I thought my body was failing me. What I didn't understand then, and I understand now, is that my body was actually trying to save me. Like I had put myself in such a deficit for 7 years that my body was like in a constant state of starvation, you could say. So eventually the body is like, enough. You've been in famine for so long. Like nowhere in nature is weight loss like an intentional thing. Like in nature, people lose weight because they're sick or because they're in famine. Like no, you know, not just people, animals, whatever.
Yeah.
So my body doesn't know that I live in a culture that says like, okay, we're gonna restrict now so we can become smaller. So after a while, the body starts catching up and the body says, you know what, we're not doing this anymore. So as a society, we tend to blame the person, like, oh, they're not trying hard enough. They're not exercising enough anymore. But that was not the case for me. Like, I was doing all the calorie counting I was doing to lose the 140 pounds. I was doing, still exercising, 5 or 6 days a week. And my body, to me, I thought like, okay, my body is failing me because I'm not losing weight anymore. But now I'm so grateful for my body because it was actually my body's way of saying, enough of this, like, we're not gonna continue this anymore.
Yeah.
So I started to learn about intuitive eating, which means learning to eat what your body actually needs. And for me, that was like horrifying because I'm like, I want junk food. Like, if I only ate what I wanted, I'd said this like a million times. Through my weight loss, I would say, if I'm not counting calories, I'm gaining weight, which is like a huge sign that you're restricting way too much. Like, if the second you stop counting calories, weight starts coming on, it's a huge sign that you are like restricting too much. So that was the thing for me. And I would also say like, no, I have to plan. I have to meal prep, because if I were to just eat whatever it is that I wanted, I would be eating pizza and McDonald's all the time. Like, that's what I would eat. And I realized after learning about this and reading about the doctors who studied this and everything, that was a response to having been on a diet and also having made some foods wrong and some foods right most of my life. Like, I saw my first nutritionist when I was like 12 years old. I don't even know if I was 12. I might have been like 10 actually.
Wow.
Yeah. And, their first thing was, start counting your, journaling about your food and all this kind of crap. So like, and my mother was always on a diet. My grandmother was always on a diet, and neither of them were ever like fat. Like, they were, I guess, bigger than the average woman, like a little thick or whatever. But like, they were not like, not that it would have made a difference if they were fat, but me seeing like their bodies that were like basically average bodies and always in this need to lose weight, I felt like this is what I'm supposed to do too. So I did Weight Watchers when I was in high school, which, God, we won't even talk about that. But Weight Watchers just launched a program for children. Like,
awful.
Yeah. Look at hashtag Wake Up Weight Watchers and you'll literally want to throw up everywhere. So yes, I have so many thoughts in my head. Like, I keep losing my place and forgetting where I want to go. But I was learning about intuitive eating is basically what it comes down to. And in learning about intuitive eating, I started to realize that it wasn't me that was failing. It was binge eating is a response to restriction. Yeah. So every time that I would be, well, not every time, all this time that I was restricting, making things off limits, eating less than I actually wanted, eating for rules, like because it was time or because it was time. Like, I didn't eat because I was hungry. I would eat because it was on a clock, time for me to eat again. Like, if it was only 2 hours later, well, I only eat every 3 hours. So I'm just going to sit here and like feel hunger pangs for the next hour. And in like the weight loss community and diet community, that's like celebrated. Like, oh, drink some water and curb your appetite. Yeah. And then, eat it later or whatever.
Your mind's trying to trick you. You're not really hungry.
Yes, exactly. And I forget what book it's in. Maybe it's in Intuitive Eating. But in one of the books that I had read, they say something like, what other biological function do we second guess? Like, when we have to pee, do we say to ourselves, like, nope, I don't think I really have to pee. I'm not going to trust my body on this one. I'll sit it out for an hour and see if I still have to pee. Yeah. But for hunger, for whatever reason, we've made that like the norm, and that's acceptable. So in deciding that I was going to listen to my body and eat the things that my body wanted to eat and trust the process, that eventually, of course, you go through a phase where you like want to eat every single thing you've ever dreamed of, because there's so many foods that are forbidden for so long. And I was afraid, and I'm sure you were too, that like for the rest of my life, I'm only going to eat junk food. But I had to trust the process and the doctors and know that eventually this will pass. Yeah. So that's where my first not my first, because I'd already had a couple, why exactly am I vegan thoughts, but that kind of really inspired me to think about it more, because there were some things I wanted to eat that were not vegan. And I had to ask myself, what are these rules in place for? Why am I still following them? And like I said, this is not to knock veganism at all. If you know my vegan story, I started it not even for restriction or weight loss. Actually, I had an ulcer in my eye that I was told was incurable. And out of desperation, I looked on the internet of natural ways to fix it, and veganism was one of them. So I said, I'm going to do this for 6 months. If my ulcer goes away, I'll stick with it. my ulcer was gone within 3 months. So I still think there is a place for veganism in the world. I think veganism is a great way to heal yourself, but should be used probably for short term. Like in history, especially my ancestors were not vegans. Like my ancestors were Vikings and crap like that. It's not even in my DNA to eat only plants. So my desire for things that were not plant-based is natural, I would say. And now it's interesting because when I said I wasn't going to be vegan anymore, I thought I would run into this place of like wanting to eat, you know, all of the meat things all of the time. And I realized I've kind of gone back to where I was before I was vegan, where I still don't like meat that much. Like every now and then I just want something that is not plant-based. But for the bulk of the time, most of my meals probably still are plant-based. I don't eat meat every day, but it's the idea that I don't have a rule that says I can't eat meat. All right.
Yeah.
And then if you accidentally do or something like that, it's like the feelings of guilt and shame and all that kind of crap that comes up. Or God forbid, you eat something that's not vegan that you didn't know wasn't vegan and you post it on the internet and the internet tells you how much you screwed up.
Yeah. The vegan police come and get you.
Yeah. So it kind of inspired me to get on this journey of really eating what it was that my body was wanting me to eat. And sometimes that was meat products. I mean, I hate to say it, I know some people are going to be really bothered by that, but I wasn't an ignorant vegan. Like, I knew about the nutrition part. I knew about having a balanced meal. It wasn't like I was living off of lettuce, like the rabbit food type. Like, I was doing all the beans and the grains and all that kind of stuff. Like, and still, the first time that I ate a non-vegan meal after leaving veganism, I felt so satisfied for so long in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. And that's when I knew, like, wow, I really was depriving myself of something. So what it comes down to is veganism is not a bad thing, but for people with disordered eating patterns, vegan becomes a crutch to enable disordered eating. Yeah, so 100%. Do you want to talk a little bit about like your discovery and your own disordered eating?
So mine's kind of similar. So for me, it was that I started as well trying to pursue the intuitive eating type, lifestyle, and I wanted to do that the best I could, and I felt that maintaining veganism was going to be a way of restriction, and the only way intuitive eating fully works is if you truly have 0 foods that are off limits and you allow yourself to intuitively eat. And I realized that, not only was it veganism, I had a lot of other things. So I also hadn't been to a fast food restaurant for like 3 years. I hadn't had soda in 2 years. Like, I had a full list of things that when I was in the like diet culture, mentality, I was proud of, right? Like, I wore these like badges because that's what society, tells you, oh, great job, great job, great job. And I realized all of those things were literally like ruining me. Like, these are all the reasons my disordered eating was like out of control. And so when I started intuitive eating, I said, I have got to have veganism. I cannot be successful as an intuitive eater and also have these restrictions. Some people have successfully navigated that, but for me, this was my personal choice. And I had already been battling with these like feelings of maybe like wanting to like eat meat or eat cheese, but that shame and guilt was just keeping me as a vegan. And so when I decided like, okay, I'm gonna go full on with this, I literally just made an overnight decision and started that journey. And I was convinced, I don't know if you felt this way, but I was convinced that I was gonna get sick, I would need to be hospitalized, like all these sorts of things that now are so irrational. Like, I think back and I'm like, Brianna, like, that's so irrational. But in the time, like, I was convinced that, like, that was where I needed to be. And as I started having these thoughts and thinking about leaving veganism and started having like my first meal here or there, like that included dairy or included a meat, it was a long process. I had to literally see a therapist to walk me through it because I had fears of food. There was all sorts of different foods. There's still some foods to this day that I'm not great with, but that in itself, like, showed me that I was using it to feed an eating disorder in a way that was not healthy for my body and
or your brain.
Oh yeah, or for my brain, or for my relationships, the people around me. I mean, there were so many times it affected my entire life. This wasn't just about food anymore, and so that's when I realized like I really have got to do something different. And started my intuitive eating journey. And it's interesting because, like you said, I literally convinced myself that I could not be controlled if I had full access to food. So that's why I restricted McDonald's, Burger King, all those places, any fast food place, because I thought if I had access to it, that I would go ham and be uncontrollable and just, gain copious amounts of weight and just be out of control.
I would always say, like, I can't even step into that, because once the floodgates are open, I can't stop
myself.
So there was like a couple year period where I barely even allowed myself a cheat day on my diet, because I would say a cheat day would turn into a binge day for me. And that is such a sign of disordered eating. If you can't eat something bad, which I hate even calling it bad, but basically if you can't eat something with low nutritional value, high fat, high calories, high sugar, and not eat the entire bag or turn it into a day of like nonstop face stuffing, that is a sign that you are practicing disordered eating.
100%.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, 100%. 100%, and I totally agree with you. But it was fascinating because as my journey began, I felt completely out of control because I did. When I allowed myself to have access to McDonald's and soda and all these places, I had been, restricting them for years. So it was a good probably couple months that is all I wanted. But I made the very conscious decision to say, I have got to allow myself access to all these foods. And until I allow myself that access, I'm going to still crave it, want it, like I was as, a vegan. I wanted all these things, but I just couldn't allow myself to quote unquote have it, or being in the diet culture mentality. So I had to say, all foods are equal, all foods, can be consumed at any time. And slowly, very slowly, I'm probably, I don't know, six months into that. And I would say that right now I'm at a really good place where I can have, McDonald's once a week or twice a day. It just depends, but I don't have that there's just this sense of I don't know how to explain it. I'm craving because you restricted
insatiable,
it.
yes.
Yeah.
For so long, every single time I would drive past a fast food restaurant, I would notice it. And it was constantly why are there so many fast food restaurants? They shouldn't open all of these. And, I understand there's studies related to obesity in America having a relation to how many fast food restaurants there are. But that's not what I was thinking about. I was thinking about, why are they tempting me at every single block? And I couldn't drive past one of these establishments without noticing it was there. Yeah. That means I wasn't going to it, I wasn't eating from it, but I would always notice it. And it was a conscious decision of I'm not going there, I'm not going there, I'm not going there. And now it's pretty cool because I'm in a place where I don't even realize that I'm driving past things, or the smell of a restaurant, if you're at the store next door or something like that, and you can smell the fry-later or whatever. The smell before, I'd be oh god, or a barbecue place or something, oh, it's drawing me. And now it's more of it's there, but it's a non-factor. Yeah. I wanted to actually backtrack on something about when you were saying I was so convinced that I was going to need to be hospitalized and stuff like that. So first of all, the eating disorders that I think that we are mostly talking about that we have in common are a binge eating disorder, which the world will have you believe this is like something you're born with or something like that. And no, that is not the case. It is binge eating is your body's response to restriction in some way. Some people also binge for emotional reasons, but for where we're coming from, having been lifelong dieters and extreme dieters and whatnot, it's a response to restriction. So binge eating was part of the thing, and it's so easy, we put as a society, not just we, but we put the blame on ourselves, where, it is kind of ourselves, because we're the ones choosing to restrict. But society's kind of put in your head that no, you're just fat fat inside. Like it's like your fat brain that makes you want to eat all the junk. But I'm telling you, when there's not so much restriction, there's also not so much binging. But the other thing that ties into veganism, because of course we spent a lot of time learning about all the health benefits of veganism, is it's actually a term that they actually have called orthorexia. And this is when you are so obsessed with nutrition and feeding, you're like, these disgusting, I used to post these quotes and now they like make me cringe of like, every bite is either fighting disease or feeding disease, which is not true. Like one bite of something is not saving you or killing you. But this is such a common thing now where people have become, so it's not saying to ignore nutrition. It's not saying that don't eat anything that's healthy for you. It's saying that when your life is revolved around whether or not something is nutritious for you and you actually have anxiety about like, when I would eat something like bad because I had everything in my life was good or bad, like every food in my life was on a side.
That's
moral
also,
value, exactly.
That's also a sign you have
an eating disorder. Yes. If you're good because you ate something or bad because you ate something, that's also, the world, when I'm saying we, most of the time I mean like society as a whole. But that's definitely something that we've made normal. Like, oh, I'm so good, I did well on my diet. Like, no, like you are not a better person because you did well on your diet, Susan. Sorry. But orthorexia, so orthorexia is what will have you thinking, oh my gosh, if I start eating these things that are bad for me, I'm going to kill myself, I'm going to hurt myself, I'm poisoning myself. I used to say that all the time. I'm so sorry if you follow me on Instagram, because I used to, not now, but then I used to say that all the time. Like, this is literal poison. Like, I did like 108 days, no sugar, and I made a video about that, and I think I've actually like taken it down now because I don't want to promote that video anymore. I like want my old videos to be up because I want to show my growth. But at the same time, I don't want them up because I don't want to send that message anymore. So most of them I've taken down already. There's like a couple lingering. I'm not sure if the sugar one is or not. But at the time, I really believed like I am restricting myself of poison. And then the first time I ate sugar after, of course, actually, it was after I did a half marathon, okay? And I hadn't had sugar in 108 days. And I decided to eat a complete cookie, which is like not even a terrible thing. It's like still a diet product. It's like a protein bar and a cookie. But they're vegan and it does have sugar. And I remember this feeling of like, oh my God, like I was gonna eat half the cookie, right? That was the plan. Of course I ate the whole cookie because once I had a bite of that, I was like, God, this is amazing. And my body was just screaming for it. And then I felt like crap about myself, like, wow, like I couldn't even only eat half a cookie. Like, I'm so out of control. This is why I need to restrict sugar to begin with. And that day after it was Miami Beach, Halloween half marathon, 2016, I think that was. And I binged the whole entire day after that because I was already bad. Like I couldn't be redeemed for this bad choice that I made that not only made me a bad person, but I had, poisoned my clean body. This temple I had cleaned for 108 days had been poisoned anyway. So screw it, might as well. I used to also say Bob, right? That's his name, from The Biggest Loser, the trainer.
Oh, I don't know.
I was obsessed with The Biggest Loser, and I heard that they're coming back. We'll make another video about that. But I'm pretty sure, Bob from The Biggest, the main trainer from The Biggest Loser. That was a quote I used to quote from him all the time. Is like, just because you eat one bad thing doesn't mean you need to throw away the whole day. That's like if you got a flat tire and you were to slash the other 3. And in theory, that makes sense, but completely ignores disordered eating, where when you've been restricting for so long, it's not always, for me that day after the half marathon, I felt like it was a conscious choice, but it was a conscious choice based off of my body screaming more, like your body needs sugar in some sense. And I had restricted it for so long that my body was screaming for it. And like I said, it's not always a conscious choice, but sometimes it is a conscious choice. But when it's not everybody decides, today I'm throwing in the towel and I'm gonna eat every single thing I see. You feel like the word control keeps coming up, and there's so much truth in the word control because it really is like a feeling of out of control, and we think something is wrong with us, but really it's an out of control that stems from too much control for too long. I think it is.
Yeah, 100%. And I think going back to the orthorexia topic, you know, for me, that I realized that that's where my eating disorder lied, when I thought that going vegan would be the way to cure my PCOS. And I think that a lot of people don't realize how slippery that slope is, because you cannot 100% cure your body no matter what you do. Like, I was convinced that if I went vegan and I just ate perfect enough that I could cure my PCOS and cure my body, and that's not true. Like, your body is like an organ, like you have all these organs working together. It's so complex. Yeah, like there's no way that you can 100% cure your body. But I convinced myself, if I need to drop this, I need to drop that. Like the restrictions just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper. Like, I was already vegan, like you said, like restricting sugar, restricting this, restricted, like at the point where I was down to like people like being like keto vegan. I'm like, what? You have like nothing left. Like,
I considered keto vegan.
Exactly. I'm like, I did too. I really considered it, and I was like, you're gonna have zero foods left. But in the moment, I was like, yeah, that's what I need to fix myself. I need to fix myself by being this. And that mentality is where the orthorexia lies. Like, this mentality that you can cure your body. Don't get me wrong, like we said, I think there is a place for veganism short term. I think there are people who benefit from natural, holistic, treatments and things like that. However, if it doesn't cure your body, doesn't mean that like you're doing it wrong and you need to do it better, which is what that's where the
like
disorder
it's your
is.
fault is where it comes down to again.
Yeah.
And actually, I always, because like I said, I'm one of the ones who pushed the you can cure your body with veganism, because for me, my ulcer really did go away. But I have to ask myself, how was I eating before then? I was eating a super processed diet, a whole lot of junk. I was going through a really hard time in my life, and I was definitely using food to like soothe some of those emotions. And then I went full on clean vegan.
Yeah.
So the question is it truly veganism that cured me, or is it the fact that I was eating vegetables 3 times a day, that I was eating fruits, that I was drinking more water, all that kind of stuff? Would I still have been able to cure it if I had been eating some of the processed stuff or some of the meat still, and just have added more nutritious foods to my diet? I'll never know, because I didn't do that. But yeah, we do have this belief of like we're going to cure every single thing. And something that I think is interesting, because you were thinking I'm going to cure, PCOS, which is a hormonal thing. With veganism, what happened for me is I'm supposed to be at my prime. Like I said, I take B12. I am so like nutrient balanced. Like, I was like a clean eating vegan. Like, I make my own salad dressings. I'm also working out like 5 days a week. I'm doing marathons, half marathons. Nothing wrong with doing marathons or half marathons, but I use those as a reason, like I have to exercise every day because I'm training for a race. So it became another excuse. And I'm at the prime of my health and fitness, you could say. And at this time is also when my hormones got messed up. I'd never had hormonal issues. I'd never had pimples. I'd never had any issue with like my periods were always normal, regular, my sex drive, things like that. And when I'm at my prime, I have a super hot boyfriend with like an 8-pack who happens to be a trainer. So we're doing 2-a-days working out. We're like messing around and doing fruitarian, which is eating only fruit for 2 weeks straight. Like, we're like all in on this together. And I lose my sex drive completely. I start having like scattered periods of like missing some, or some being late, or some being early, or some being longer, shorter, things like that. I start having insane cramps that were worse than I ever had, and I get adult acne. And I should have been, I was the epitome of health at that time. Like, the perfect picture. All of my doctors were telling me congratulations. My doctor then even like refused to believe anything was wrong with me because I lived such a healthy lifestyle. When I let her know, like, there's really something wrong with my sex drive. Like, I have a super hot boyfriend, and like, I don't even want him. And she's like, maybe look at the relationship. Is it something emotional that you don't actually like him that much, and that's what's keeping you from wanting to have sex with him? And instead we're ignoring the fact that I have all of the signs for my hormones being disrupted. Fast forward a couple years, last year I find out I have a thickened endometrium, I have nodules on my thyroid, all of this hormonal shit that people suggest, or world suggests, and even doctors suggest, some nutritionists suggest, should be cured by eating a clean vegan diet and exercising. Yet doing all of those things, I ended up with these issues.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like you think you can cure all these things, but it's like not necessarily true. And you probably feel like responsible for that, like, but that's not true. Like I don't know.
We had an event recently, a body positive breakfast, where we got into some conversations about body positivity and learning to love yourself where you're at. And it's, first of all, it's nobody's moral responsibility to be healthy. However, we talked a lot about you can't actually be a healthy person who's in a larger body.
Oh,
and one of the things that we talked about was that disease and disability do not discriminate. No. So we have this idea that if we're healthy, none of these things can happen to us. And of course, there are studies that suggest, obesity causes this or whatever, but we know over and over, because there are so many studies that say the opposite, that correlation is not always causation.
Yeah.
How many middle-aged men do you know in a normal body who are not obese who have a heart attack? Lots of them, but yet we'll blame obesity on heart attacks. But an example of, you can be in prime condition is like a Lance Armstrong, for example. This is an athlete, Tour de France, eats like an athlete, moves like an athlete, still ends up with testicular cancer.
Exactly.
And he's just the first one to come to my head, but he's not like a single case. Like, there are plenty of people who live a super healthy lifestyle who still end up with diseases and disorders and disabilities and things like that. And we have, when we're sucked into it, and I know that this video is offensive to some people because it's really hard to hear this when you're in it. Because, she said, it feels like you're attacking my religion.
Yeah.
Like, this is working for me, shut up. And if that's you, you can turn it off. You can get mad. It's okay.
Yeah.
But someday, when it stops working for you, or something happens that suggests maybe this isn't the cure that I thought it was, you'll remember this video and maybe come back to it.
Yeah.
Or maybe you won't, and you'll never feel like that, and that's okay too. But the bigger thing is that there's a lot more people who are going through what we've experienced than who are going to actually live out their diet culture life for the rest of their life.
Yeah, I mean, diet culture is not, being on a diet is not long term. Diets are not successful long term. And you could go on a diet and maintain this ideal weight. We wouldn't be on all these different ones.
One of the examples, I think this is from the Intuitive Eating book. And by the way, I'll link all of these books I keep talking about in the description box below. But one of the things that I read, I believe, in the Intuitive Eating book is, if you take your car to a mechanic because it has a problem, and then the mechanic says they fix it, you drive it off the lot, it works for, a little while, and then all of a sudden that same thing is broken again, are you going to blame the car, or are you going to blame the mechanic? You're going to turn around, 5 miles down the road and go back to the mechanic and say, bro, you didn't fix this. You didn't deliver on your promise. But that's not how it works with diets. With diets, it's never the diet's fault that the car broke down again. It's our fault. Oh, my car sucks. My car can't have an engine that's fixed. No, the mechanic didn't fix the freaking engine. It's not about the car.
Traditionally speaking, you're right. These diets aren't going to work. So there's always going to be this generation of us, this group of us that are there at that point of, these diets aren't working. And, I feel like, maybe 10 years ago when I was in high school, there wasn't this population of us that were saying, hey, we're anti-diet culture, and this is real, and let's educate you. It was just get on another diet until you find one. So I think it's really important to us, and that's why we're here speaking our truths, is that we want people to know, there is a group of us that are anti-diet. There is a group of us that are saying, wait. The science is showing diets don't work. Why is our, society pushing them so much? There are a group of us that are saying, wait, statistics say, that it's actually more dangerous for disease and health risks for you to be underweight than it is for you to be overweight. So if you're looking at all these statistics and doing all these different things, you know, it's showing that there is, you know, some error in this like diet culture mentality, and there's a group of us, you know, that are trying to change that and make people aware, because I know 10 years ago I wasn't. No. I just kept planning my next diet, and with that kept shaming myself over and over again, and just like drastically wanting to change my body. And now I'm at a point where I feel like, you know, that's not the case. You know, do I love my body every single day? No, we're human. Like, I'm sure you have days too.
And even at my almost six-pack having fittest,
yeah.
I didn't love my body every day. Exactly. So the changing of the body wasn't it.
Yeah, exactly. So, like you said, you know, at my quote-unquote thinnest, I literally didn't even recognize myself and was like having issues where the person I saw in the mirror wasn't who I thought I was, and it was like really weird for me. So, you know, it doesn't matter. Like, that doesn't change, you know. Like, you can be whatever size and, like, still have these body image issues or whatever. But you can get to a point where I feel like I am now, where, you know, I said this at the Body Positive breakfast the other day, that, you know, your body is just your body, and you can be thankful for the things it does for you and carries you through life. But, like, there's so much more to you than your body.
Yeah. So I thought it was super interesting what you just said about seeing yourself in the mirror and not even, like, recognizing yourself. Because I went through this phase where when I was, you know, my fittest or thinnest, and I would talk about, I always thought being a big girl was just who I was, because I'd always been a big girl. And I had accepted, like, this is just who I am. But then when I got on to my weight loss journey and actually lost a lot of weight and realized my body could be smaller, I was like, no, that's not who I am. And I'm going to prove that I can be anything or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm going to prove that people who are in big bodies can be in smaller bodies. And so much of my life just became about, like, proving things to not just myself, but also to other people.
Yeah.
But it, like, makes me kind of sad to think about now, because if I look at the history of my life before I ever went on a diet, but, you know, and when anything started, like, before any of this began, being a bigger bodied person is who I was.
Yeah.
So it was like, I thought that I was, like, doing something worthy of, like, pride, but really I was kind of just in denial of who I was. Yeah. Like, my life, it's weird because I'm not going to ever deny that there were parts of my life that I thought were better when I was thinner. I loved being able to buy clothes everywhere. Mm-hmm. I loved people not making comments about my weight. Like, you know, on the internet, random people weren't calling me fat and things like that. In dating, men, you know, less men were, you know, not to say that men don't like big girls, because they do. But to say, like, you know, if I was on a dating website as a bigger girl, every now and then some, like, asshole would be like, oh my God, you're so fat. Yeah. Like, why are you even here? As a smaller bodied person, stuff like that doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely an advantage. Not being shamed at the doctor whenever I would get weighed was definitely an advantage. Like, there were things that I definitely preferred over being a smaller bodied person. But where was I going with this?
But that's not who you really were. Like.
Yeah, but I guess that's what it is even though there were some things that felt a little better, I always did feel like not myself. Like, there was a weird feeling of like this, like, I don't know that I ever looked in the mirror and was like, no, I can't even say that, because there are so many times I took selfies, and these are probably still on my Instagram if you scroll back long enough, where I'm like, I cannot believe that this is me. Like, and I, you know, my internet name is BigGirlFitGirl, and people would ask me, why BigGirlFitGirl? Like, you're not even a big girl. And I would say, now it's a perfect name for me. I didn't know, like, probably, God knew when I chose that name that I would be a big girl who was also fit. Triathlete, hey, maybe I don't look like one, but I am. But when I made that username, it meant two things to me. Either that I went from being a big girl to a fit girl, and the other thing that it meant to me was I'm still one of you on the inside. Like, inside, I still feel like a big girl. I just look like a fit girl now. But I always felt more like I related to people who were in bigger bodies because that was what my whole life experience until then was. So it was really weird because I thought like I was changing myself for the better, but really I was resisting who I really was. Like instead of just saying, you know, I wanted to become a healthier person, which again, you have no moral obligation to be healthier. There are thin people who are not healthy who will not be shamed for not being healthy. You have no moral obligation to become healthier. But I wanted to become healthier when I started my journey. I didn't have high blood pressure yet, but it was in the intermediate range or whatever, and I wanted to make sure it didn't get into the high range, and my ego was so big that said I am not going to be the fat and unhealthy stereotype, so I'm going to do something about this before I end up with high blood pressure. At that time, I didn't understand that I could have added more vegetables to my diet. I could have added more nutrient-dense food, and I could have moved a little bit more because I had no physical activity in my life at that time, and I could have become a healthier person without having to go through this mess of becoming skinny. But, I mean, like, many times in life, I'm so grateful for the journey now because I see the purpose in it. I've always been one who has an inner calling that I need to share my truth and I need to speak out loud about things. And I think as a messenger, like I think that's my role on earth here is I had to go through this so I could be a messenger about it. Had I learned that at my starting point, like, oh, I'm just gonna add some nutrient-dense food and I'm just gonna move my body more and I'll be healthier, I wouldn't have this story to share with you, and what credibility would I have to say losing half of your body weight, literally I lost 2 pounds more than half of my body weight, did not give me this life that we're promised of like everything's gonna be great and wonderful. Like my whole world revolved around being skinny.
100%. And like you said, it's so interesting because, you know, I literally could not recognize myself in the mirror and felt almost as like I had imposter syndrome. Like I was living in a body that was not one that I had grown up knowing, down to like little minute things, like and like superficial things, right? Like I had my entire life always had large breasts and was known for them. Well, when you lose a dramatic amount of weight, you lose your breast. So I no longer looked in the mirror and saw, you know, a big-breasted girl. Like I had nothing, and I was like, who am I? Like that was like my signature and who I was. And I was like, I don't know who this body is anymore. It was like feeling bones I had never felt before. I was like, oh, like I just felt uncomfortable even in my own body, and like felt like I was like lying and like deceiving people to be in this like smaller body because I was like, this isn't who I am. Like I'm doing so many ridiculous things to get here. Like this isn't truly who I am. Like so now, especially now, I can look back and say that because in being in my body now that I am, I'm 100% true to myself, right? Like I, you know, am really, really trying to embrace my body for what it is and not change it, you know, from not dyeing my hair, which I'm not saying is bad, but I'm just saying like, you know, I would constantly bleach my hair because I was convinced that like I had to have blonde hair to be accepted in society. And I'm like, oh, now I can have dark hair and like be like who I am. Like that's so weird. But I definitely feel like I, in my body now, feel more at home. Like, because I'm not putting all these restrictions and guidelines and, you know, must-haves on who I can be. Like I'm just me, like that's it. Versus most of my life in diet culture and in our society, it's been 100% of like, what can I do to fit in? What can I do to be my smallest and most normal, you know, thinnest, you know, whatever it could be. And it feels horrible, you know?
I relate to that so much. And me, a couple years ago, if I had heard you say, like, oh, it doesn't feel like myself, and I feel like this isn't really who I am and stuff, I would have been like, honey, like, you need coaching or therapy because you need to know that you deserve to have a thin body. Like, you're resisting that you deserve this. And you're just, you know, you're going to manifest yourself back into gaining weight because you don't believe that you can have this. And, like, I'm telling you, I would have really said that to her.
And I would have thought that.
Yes. But now, like, having lived it, I can assure you, it's not a thing of believing that I don't deserve to be thin. Because there is a place you come in life where the idea that somebody thinks they don't deserve to be thin is coming from a fat phobic place that believes that thinness is better than thickness or fatness.
Yep.
So it isn't like thinness is not a reward. Like it's not, if it's not a better thing or a worse thing, then what do you mean deserving of it? Like that doesn't make sense.
That doesn't adequate. Yeah. It's not, doesn't add up, you know. Like you said, thinness is not this ultimate reward. You know, being true to yourself and living and enjoying life, right? Like that is the ultimate reward. And I think that that's the difference in like where I'm at now. Like being, you know, confident in who you are and, you know, enjoying life because it's okay if you have that cupcake at the birthday party, you know, enjoying life because you don't have to spend your entire Sunday meal prepping for the next week. Like you can go do things with friends, like whatever it may be. You know, that to me is so much more important and more rewarding than being, you know, thin. Yeah.
Something that's not really related to what you just said, but for some reason came up, like enjoying a cupcake or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had this thing when I was at like my biggest, I felt embarrassed to eat in front of people. Like I didn't want, it was like obviously people knew that I ate, like I was 300 pounds, but I felt like a shame and like not wanting people to see me eat. Like I didn't want people to judge me for what I was eating. So I would do a lot of my eating like in private. Like for example, if I was on my way, like having a really busy day and I stopped and got fast food, instead of like bringing the food inside with me to eat it when I got wherever my next destination was, I would eat it in the car because I didn't want the people wherever I was going to know that me, a big girl, ate McDonald's, you know?
Yes.
So to me, that was like something I dreamed of. Like when I would see, I'm a hairstylist and I have clients show up to the salon with like a bacon, egg, and cheese bagel and a colada, and I would be like, damn, like, she doesn't even care. Like she's just eating that right in front of everybody. I would love to not experience like that shame. Then when I got thin, all of a sudden, I had posted about this on Instagram. I was no longer ashamed to eat in front of people. I realized it when I had dinner at a friend's house and with her kids and stuff, and she had taken a couple random pictures, and she posted a picture of me on the internet of me like half my fork, like shoveling food in my mouth. But we were eating like, and it was delicious. She made a vegan meal to accommodate me, but like there's rice and beans with like amazing seasoning and stuff. But I remember thinking like, wow, I've overcome this. Like I'm at a new place in my journey because there's a picture of me eating on the internet, and like I have no shame about it, and I don't feel any kind of way about this picture being on the internet, and thinking like this was so cool. But what I realize now is it wasn't about that I was okay being seen eating. It was actually more to do with my dietary choices. It was almost like I was proud because whatever I was eating was always super healthy. Like I could eat in front of people because I was eating super healthy things that I knew people were going to say, and this was subconscious, obviously. It wasn't like I was looking for the compliment, but people would always be like, oh my gosh, you eat so good. I need to be more like you and whatever. So it's been interesting now in this new phase of self-acceptance where I can eat in front of people, but not have to, like, I'm not worried about what I'm eating in front of people, I guess is the way to put it. And I don't even know where that ties into this, but somewhere, I guess, along the lines of, like, just feeling like ashamed of consuming because I was larger. And then once you get into this body positive and self-love and intuitive eating kind of thing, there isn't any more shame attached to what you're eating regardless of what your size is. Like I don't only have to eat in front of people if I'm eating something healthy. I can eat food in front of people because I'm a human being who eats food.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's interesting because, you know, you touched on it a little bit, but that, you know, first of all, eating in private is also a great indicator of an eating disorder. And that was one of my big things. Like I would eat, and even when I was vegan, like I would eat like my vegan meal in private or like go get something in private. and then like go to the birthday party, even though it was like dinner was served, and I'd be like, oh no, I already ate because like it was vegan. But I also like felt shame and guilt around that, so like I wouldn't bring it to places. Like there's so many different pieces to that. But also, you know, I think it's interesting, like that just shows that was okay, you being able to eat as a thinner body whatever you wanted and not feel bad about it, like that's like a thin privilege, right? So people don't realize that that like we, you know, judge people by what they eat if they're in a larger body, like. But if a thin body person ate that McDonald's, like there was no judgment, right? Like no judgment. Like they're not gonna get a heart disease, you know, even though because they're thin, you know, like whatever. But like we see a larger body, we immediately judge them. Like
they should be on a diet, don't they know
like,
better?
what
Do
are
they
they
even
doing
care about themselves?
Yeah. So it's like that is a great example of how thin privilege exists. And I think that it's a great example of how you can sit back and question, you know, your biases and say, like, do I have that? Like, do I have that fat phobia? And you know, what does it look like? But also saying, like, for you know, a person in a larger body, like that is totally a thin privilege thing, but like has nothing to do with you being in a larger body. So like me now enjoying my meal, like I realize that that's a thin privilege thing, and that I also have that same privilege, you know, and should have that same privilege being in a larger body
to eat whatever
I want, and that I'm not gonna let society and that thin privilege like ruin my meal. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna order, you know, whatever, 5 appetizers because I want to try all of them with my boyfriend at dinner. And like if the waitress has something to say about it, you know, then whatever, that's on her, you know. But I'm like, I have that right to eat and consume and take up space and do all those things just like another person who's in a thinner body does. And there should be no difference. Like it should just be, we are all consuming food, you know. But that's interesting. It's also interesting, I wonder like how you feel about the fact that like you know, you did have thin privilege for a time, right? Versus, and then like now, do you feel like you no longer have that, like you were saying? This is kind of off topic. But
no, it's not. It's all on topic. But let's see. This isn't something I guess I've talked about before, or anything that I've like put into words because I haven't had the conversation. I would say when I was thin, I hate even admitting this, but I have to say it. I truly became a million times more of a judgmental person as a thin person.
Yeah.
Because I really felt like if I can do it, so can you, and nobody has any excuses to be overweight.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I was always big. So if I can do this, there's no way you can't. And I was poor when I started, like poor, like barely paying my bills poor. So I was like, nope, I was fat and I was poor. If I can do this, anybody can do it. So I definitely became a much more judgmental person. Let's see, things that were different for me.
Well, you said one.
Well, one, not having harassment on internet.
Yeah,
like
that's a great one.
I mean, every now and then, people are just cruel, so every now and then, like, somebody would still, like, I addressed this in another video, I've always had, like, this arm roll. Even at my thinnest, I had the arm roll, so, like, every now and then, like, a really mean person would, like, call me out on my fat arms, even though I was, like, super skinny. So that still happened, but I was able to buy clothes from anywhere. I was able to fit into one size fits all or one size fits most clothes. When I fly a lot, I'm originally from Massachusetts and I like to travel, so I do a lot of flying. And I love Southwest, and Southwest is not assigned seating. You just sit wherever you want to. And the reaction from people I would choose a seat next to was very different than the people I would sit next to as a larger body. When you're in a larger body and you're walking down the aisle on an airplane, people are looking at you like, oh God, please don't pick me, please don't pick me. And in a smaller body, I can't say that happened. Like, I never felt like, and I don't know if that was me, because sometimes we're you know, projecting onto people. So if it was because I felt like they were going to have a problem with me sitting next to them, but how it seemed, it's my reality. So it's true for me, is that people perceived me differently when I was choosing my seat on an airplane when I was in a smaller body. Something that was interesting, I don't know if I would necessarily say this is thin privilege, but it's an interesting difference, is in a small body when I was exercising, people weren't paying attention to me. When I was in a larger body exercising, and this, I've done this myself, in my thin body, I did this to people, and now I look back and I'm like, well, I guess that I kind of appreciated it when I was at my biggest, when people would be like, you go girl, like when I would like jog by or something like that, I would kind of, part of me would like the encouragement, but now that I'm in a larger body again and I continue to be an athlete, there are times when people will say stuff like that to me, and I am very aware, like people like, oh, like some random person will come up to me at the gym like, oh girl, I've been watching you and you go so hard and all this. Nobody said that to me in my thin body, and I went hard in my thin body, like I was working out so hard, but nobody like commented or like paid attention to me. I think as a thin person exercising, it wasn't like an anomaly where there's like a lot more attention paid to people who are larger.
Well, I was thinking like a great example of that, right? Like in the body positive community, is that like people love to like, you know, comment and say, oh, you know, you're so amazing for, you know, posting pictures or wearing a bikini.
You're so brave.
You're so brave to be in this larger body posting pictures.
And exist publicly.
It exists, and I'm like, no.
And we know the intentions are good. We know you really do think you're giving a compliment, but it's not a compliment.
That's a bias.
You're saying like, wow, I can't believe that you're brave enough to do this. Amy Schumer actually talks about that in one of her skits. Yes. She's like, you know, I did a nude cover or whatever, and Amy's not even, and I wouldn't call her a larger body person, but she's, you know, she's a little thick in the midsection or whatever. But Amy, she said that like I did this nude cover and it comes out and people described it in a way that you don't want to be described, and that was brave.
It's not like brave for existing.
Yeah.
Like that's
I mean it's sad, but it is, because so many people do have that bias that you are putting yourself out there for mega criticism, but it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
And that's where there's a bias, right? Like that's where there's an issue. So it's like, you know, we shouldn't, you know, good intentions, but bad execution, right? So that's what it reminds me of, like you working out, right? Like they're like, oh, look at you, and it's like, no, like you don't need to do that. Like I'm here existing just like everybody else.
Like on the treadmill on the side of me is a woman who is skinny fat, they call it, where she hasn't moved in 6 years, smokes a ton of cigarettes, eats crap food, and it's also her first day at the gym, and nobody's congratulating her for being there, but I'm getting congratulations. Another thing that I noticed is my whole life people have told me, you have such a pretty face.
Oh God.
When I was in a smaller body, I just got, you are so pretty. It's like when you're in a larger body and people want to tell you that they think you're attractive or you have a beautiful face. And I know, like I said, I know the intention is to be kind, but it actually is kind of like, wow, that lipstick looks nice. Your teeth look really white. And like, what? So saying you have such a pretty face really is a nice way of saying your face is beautiful, but I want to make sure you understand I'm only talking about your face. There was actually, recently I went to a wedding where there was this incredible wedding singer, and he was a really handsome guy. And somebody at the wedding even said that to me as like, oh my gosh, he's so handsome. Like his face is really handsome, and he was in a bigger body. And I just responded, yeah, he is really handsome. Like, why do we have to give the disclaimer of like, he's fat, but he's handsome? Like, that's an interesting thing. Let's see, what other kind of,
so I would assume though that since you have been literally like full circle, right? Like
literally every size. I've been as small as a size 6 and as large as a size 24. So everywhere in between I have been.
So I think you probably truly can see, you know, the biases and the thin privilege, you know, because you've been it all, right? So you've had a chance to see a little bit of each, so probably makes you more aware of these things versus like an average then, you know, straight body person who's always been, you know, they don't necessarily know these thin privileges they have, versus I feel like you now, you're probably like, yeah, like, okay, like airlines really do need to like, you know, widen their seats, like this is
Which is
kinda
an
out of
interesting
control.
conversation actually, because I used to be, and I never really thought about that in my big body, in my original big body.
Yeah.
I thought that this is not the airline's problem, I need to lose weight.
Like I'm too big for
Then
that.
I lost weight, and I definitely didn't think of it then, because then I was like shaming people like, no, you need to lose weight. If I can do it, you can do it too. But now in the space that I'm in, I'm realizing like shame is never a means for creating long-term change in a positive way. Like you can't shame anybody into and people, I've seen people on the internet say this of like, yes, you can, they actually have proven that you can shame somebody into losing weight. Yeah, totally, you can, but not long term. And although their body is going to be smaller, it has an effect on their mental health. And if the big picture is health, like everybody says, oh, I don't care how you look, I just want you to be healthier. We have to look at big picture health.
Yeah.
And full spectrum big picture health is not just physical, it's mental and emotional health too. So is somebody a healthier person if they're in a smaller body, but mentally and emotionally they're in a worse place of feeling like as if they're shamed? So to me, I never used to feel like, of course, like the world should accommodate for larger bodies, but the way it is, and this is, I know maybe in nature bodies weren't as big as they have become now, because we do have things like genetically modified foods and all kinds of processes and fast food and all this stuff that's been made available to us, but it's not going away. So because this is the way we've been born into the world and the way we've been raised and the way our bodies have acclimated to, we are not going to live in a world where everybody is in a, I want to say average size body, but what is an average body anymore? That's not going to happen. We're never going to get rid of all the big people. So I do feel as though there is a bit of a responsibility to be able to accommodate these people. Somebody shouldn't not be able to fly or have to pay twice as much just because they live in a larger body. Another example, on the last Belize retreat that I had, we had an issue with one of the women who was the larger size with kayaking. I had never, and you know, I really struggled with this for a little while, because I put her in this situation of suggesting, yes, of course we're gonna kayak, of course the kayak's gonna accommodate your body. And this, I don't wanna scare anybody from trying kayaking, but it happened, and I know that she would be okay with me talking about this, because she's in our body positive movement too, but the kayak sunk. Like the kayak couldn't handle her body. And it would be easy to say, I'm too big to go kayaking. But as you know, the other girls went off and kayaked, and her and I stayed back so we could talk about this, and you know, let her work through her feelings and let out her tears and that kind of stuff. And one of the huge realizations for me is she's not too big for the kayak. The kayak is not sufficient for anybody of size. The kayak only accommodates to a certain size, and by not having more watercrafts, chairs, you know, amusement park rides, whatever the thing is, by not having these things that accommodate other bodies, it's not a fault of the humans who exist in a certain size. It's just a lack of accessibility. Like it would be, you know, wrong to have a flight, for example, that doesn't accommodate somebody with a disability. Somebody who's maybe in a wheelchair or something. Those people are accommodated, and it's easy to say, well, that's not their fault. That's the fault of the fat person that they can't work there. But who's to say that's not their fault? Some people may have been born in a predicament that requires them to have a wheelchair. Somebody else may be a drunk driver and get on their motorcycle drunk, have an accident, lose a leg, and is now in a wheelchair. But we accommodate that person even though that is the fault of that person. So put fault aside, like, why do we have to live in this world where it's your fault? And this goes into so many other things, drug addiction, and so many other places, but for the sake of not making this video 2 hours long, we're gonna just stick with the body thing, but it doesn't matter who's to blame. It matters that this is the way it is. Do you want to accommodate the general public or don't you? Like people and places and businesses are frowned upon for not accommodating different abilities as far as, you know, disabilities and needing, I hate even the word, isn't there a more politically correct word for that now? If there is, tell us in the comments. I'm pretty sure that there is a better word for that now than disability. Sounds like a disadvantage or like a fault or something, like something wrong. I think there is a better word for it.
They call me opposite able-bodied now, so I think that's more. Yeah, so I don't know.
Something not able, I don't know. I'm not sure what the better word is, but my intention is not to offend anybody. It's my ignorance, not my intention. And this is not to say that an aircraft necessarily needs to have, every chair needs to be large, but there just should be some accommodation. And this brings, I had jury duty on April Fool's Day, go figure, it was a joke. But in the jury duty room, there actually were chairs for people of size. Like there were lots of chairs, like average size chairs, and then there were chairs that were about double the size of an average size chair. And that was so cool, but the crappy part about it was average size people were sitting in the chairs. And then there was this guy standing in the back of the room who was probably a good, 400 or more pounds, leaning against a wall, having to like stand and put that pressure on his knees and whatever all day long while somebody in a smaller body was sitting there. So let's just make a PSA about that. Just like it's not appropriate to use the handicap stall in the bathroom because somebody who actually needs it may come. If you see like something that is accommodated for a person of size, save it for the person of size.
We don't have a lot of those options, so if you see
so when you see them, give them to them. Exactly. Exactly. Oh, wow. We went so many places in this conversation. But I think that's really what we wanted to do was like not have, a pinpoint of what we needed to talk about and just have like an authentic conversation about things, we talked about eating disorders, we talked about veganism, we talked about thin privilege or fat bias. What else have we covered today?
A lot of it.
Body
positivity.
Body positivity. We went on a lot of different topics, but
I think it's a good general.
It is, and I even hate to stop it here, but this video is literally gonna take like 8 or 12 hours to upload to YouTube. So I think, do you feel pretty complete?
Yeah, super complete.
Okay.
I think we both kind of shared a little bit of our journey, and like you said, touched on a lot of topics. I also think it's a great way for you guys to kind of like say what else you want to hear more about.
That's what I was going to say also, is this doesn't have to be a one-time thing. We are talking about starting a podcast. We really do want to start a podcast. Thumbs up, give us a thumbs up if you think we should start a podcast. We're working out, I guess, the logistical and technical part of how we actually do that. But it's something we're definitely talking about. But in the meantime, like this doesn't have to be a one-time, like, this one time Brianna came on my channel. Maybe Brianna will end up with her own channel where she talks about these things too, but I'm totally down to do this again also. So, you can let us know in the comments more topics you'd like to hear us talk about. That would be cool. And also just sharing your own experiences. Like we know that we're not alone in this, and something we're super passionate about is there's so many communities of fitness-minded people out there that exist. And not to say there isn't a body positive community, because it actually is growing. But we really want, we know there are more people in this space and in this mindset that we have access to or we really know about. So if you're kind of on a similar journey and you're in this space too, let's talk about it. We want to know about your experiences and what the type of things that you'd want to talk about too.
100%.
So I feel good. I'm glad we did this. And I'm so proud of you for stepping out of your comfort zone and being on video. Especially to talk about super personal stuff. Because I know, actually it's a beautiful thing because for the most part, it is support that we get from the internet. But there's, always, especially bringing veganism into it, there will be some people who will have a hard time. And I don't even necessarily want to call them haters, because sometimes it's not hate. It really is you can't see when we're under the rock, we don't know we're under the rock.
100%. And I can definitely understand it because I've been there. So I guess
there was a time when this conversation, everything in it would have triggered the hell out of me. It made me so mad. So if that's how you feel, that's okay. You're allowed to feel like that. But I just am not going to allow the fact that some people feel like that to keep me from talking about it. And I know that you feel the same too.
100%.
So I guess where I was going with that though is thank you for your vulnerability. And when you do see anybody who rejects this information, just know that it generally has nothing to do with you. And it's just a thing of where that person's at, the experience that that person has had, the beliefs that that person's had, the culture that person is living in. And it's maybe it doesn't feel good or it's not necessarily okay or high vibe or the mature thing to do, but there's reasons that people behave in the way that people behave the way that they do. And it gives us a good opportunity to practice either having an adult conversation with them, or practicing not having to respond to everything.
Yeah,
that we
setting
don't agree with.
boundaries.
Yeah.
Which is something, you know, we should all practice.
Yes,
So.
that's a good part of self-care. Thanks for watching us today. Don't forget, if you like this video and you want more, give us a thumbs up. If you have something specific you'd like to hear us talk about, leave a comment below. And also, the books I referenced, as well as Brianna's social media, will be linked in the description box below. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah.
Bye.